The sun of July 3, 1863, did not just provide heat. It literally melted the gray wool uniforms on the backs of the Confederate soldiers. A thick, heavy silence hung in the air. This silence was broken only by the annoying buzzing of flies over the bodies of dead horses and the deep, rough breathing of thousands of men waiting. General Robert Lee stood on the top of Seminary Ridge. He squeezed his old binoculars so hard that his knuckles turned white. In that moment, he did not see maps or political goals. He only smelled the cheap tobacco his officers were chewing and the sharp dust on his tongue. Across from him, through 3/4 of a mile of open farm fields, the Union Army waited on Cemetery Ridge. Between them lay golden wheat that would soon turn red. Lee believed he could not be defeated, and that belief became his most dangerous enemy. Behind him, James Longstreet, the man Lee called his old war horse, looked at the ground with a dark expression. The psychological battle between the two Southern leaders was at its highest point. Longstreet understood what Lee refused to see. The war had changed. Movement and defense now meant more than reckless bravery. All day, Longstreet had tried to convince his commander to go around the left side of the Union Army. He wanted to force them to leave their defenses and fight on equal ground. But Lee was proud of his recent victories at Chancellorsville and Fredericksburg. He saw this advice only as a sign of weakness. In his eyes, his soldiers could do the impossible. He looked at the iron line of blue uniforms on the hill. He believed that one strong hit in the center, where a group of trees stood behind a stone wall, would decide the battle and the entire war. This was the deadly math of pride. 15,000 men against a strong position with cannons that had a perfect view of the field. Preparation for the attack began with the loudest cannon fire in the history of the Western Hemisphere. About 150 Southern cannons opened fire at 1 in the afternoon. The ground shook so much that it felt as if nature itself was protesting the killing. The noise was heard in Philadelphia, hundreds of miles away. But here on the field, the soldiers felt it as a physical blow to the chest. The taste of copper from fear mixed with the smell of gunpowder smoke. The smoke covered the field so thickly that the sun looked like a dim red spot. However, this was where the first part of the disaster was hidden. The Confederate artillery was running out of ammunition. The shells that remained had poor fuses. Instead of exploding on the Union positions, they flew over the ridge and landed in the back. They did not hurt the Union infantry, who were simply hiding behind stone walls. General Henry Hunt, the commander of the Northern Artillery, used a trick. He ordered his cannons to stop firing to make Lee think they were destroyed. This trick worked. Lee decided the way was clear. At 3 in the afternoon, General George Pickett, a stylish officer with curled hair, received the order that would make his name a symbol of tragedy. 15,000 men walked out of the forest and formed perfect lines. This was not a fast run, it was a parade march toward death. The front of the line was almost 1 mile wide. Soldiers walked shoulder to shoulder. Their bayonets shined in the sun like a moving sea of steel. Each man had a few crackers in his pocket and hope in his heart that the war would end after this hill. They hoped to return to their families in Virginia or Mississippi. They had to cross 1,500 yards of open space under the burning sun. When the Southerners were halfway there and crossed the Emmitsburg Road, the silence on Cemetery Ridge exploded. The Union artillery, which Lee thought was gone, began to fire with its full voice. Now they did not use solid balls, they used canister shot. These were hundreds of small steel balls that turned cannons into giant shotguns. One blast could kill 10 or 15 men in a single line. From that moment, the true nature of war became clear. The lines moved closer together as men stepped over the bodies of their friends, but the holes in the lines grew larger. The Southern officers died first because they were on horses and were easy targets. In this chaos, the Union soldiers began to shout, "Fredericksburg! Fredericksburg!" They were reminding the enemy of their own past victory, but now the roles were reversed. The most dramatic moment happened at the angle. This was a small turn in the stone wall protected by soldiers from Pennsylvania. A group of men from Virginia, led by General Lewis Armstead, reached the wall. Armstead had put his hat on the tip of his sword so his men could see him through the smoke. They jumped over the stones and fought by hand. At that moment, the South was only a few steps away from victory. This was the high watermark of the Confederacy, the highest point of their success. But the physics of war was stronger than bravery. Armstead had only a few hundred men left against thousands of fresh Union soldiers who were running to the area from all sides. Armstead fell near the cannons he had promised to capture. 45 minutes after the attack started, everything was over. What was left of the divisions of Pickett flowed backward. This was not a fast escape. It was a slow, numb retreat of men who had seen hell. More than half of the 15,000 men who started the attack were left lying in the wheat. When Pickett, who survived by a miracle, returned to Lee, the general told him to prepare his division. Pickett's answer was the final word for the whole campaign. "General Lee, I have no division." Robert Lee rode his horse, named Traveler, toward the survivors. He repeated the same sentence. "It is all my fault. You men did everything you could. It is only my fault." In that moment, something important broke inside him. He realized that his belief that the spirit of a soldier could beat the logic of fire and steel was a great mistake. Gettysburg did not end that evening. It continued in the cries of the wounded that were heard across the field all night. The sound was like a terrible, constant hum. The army of Lee did not have the resources to take everyone with them. Thousands of wounded men were left behind. The logistics of the South were exhausted. There were not enough wagons, not enough bandages, and not even enough clean water. This defeat took the life out of the Confederacy. They did not just lose men, they lost the best part of their army, the experienced soldiers who could not be replaced. From that day on, the South never tried a major attack in the North again. The advantage moved to the Union forever. The mistake of Lee was not just a small error in one day. It was a psychological trap that many great leaders fall into. He stopped seeing his enemy as equal. He decided that willpower could change the laws of physics. Pickett's charge was the moment of truth when the romantic idea of 19th century war was broken by the hard reality of the 20th century, a century of mass death and industrial power. The legacy of Gettysburg stayed on that field, not just as monuments, but as a permanent reminder of the price people pay for the pride of their leaders. In the silence that followed the last shot, it became clear. The South did not lose because they lacked courage. They lost because their general believed in the legend of himself more than the reality that looked at him through the barrels of the enemy cannons.